on today's StoryBeat.
What I've learned is that when you're making a pitch to a prospective contact or a writer, you really need to research the company you're pitching and the person to know what they do, to be personal, to say something about them. In other words, you're not the only one in this game.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, the brilliant singer Joanie Pallatto, was described by Rick Kogan of the Chicago Tribune as having a stirring and special voice. Joanie toured with the Glenn Miller Orchestra as a featured vocalist before moving to Chicago in 1979. As a solo singer, group singer, and voiceover talent, Joanie has recorded hundreds of radio and television commercials nationally. As a jazz vocalist, she's performed at such renowned clubs as Chicago's City Winery, Andy's, and the Green Mill, and legendary New York venues like the Iridium, Pangea, and Birdland. Also, she's appeared at major events, from the Chicago Jazz Festival to being a featured soloist with Daniel Barenboim in Ellington Among Friends at Symphony Center. Co-owner and partner with pianist, composer, and husband Bradley Parker-Sparrow at Sparrow Sound Design Recording Studio and Southport and Northport Records, Joanie has expertise in all aspects of music production. Joanie's new CD, My Original Plan, features modern guitar virtuoso Fareed Haque, with whom she co-produced the album, and showcases 14 original songs written by Joanie. For much more about Joanie and her other critically acclaimed recordings, please visit chicagosound.com. And please be sure to stick around at the end of today's show for a special treat. Joanie has lent us 2 songs off of her new CD, Do Butterflies Cry, followed by the title track, My Original Plan. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm truly thrilled to welcome one of the best vocalists working today, Joanie Pallatto. Joanie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Steve. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you've joined me today. So you've been performing for a while now. It's not like you just started last week. How did all this musical magic begin? Where did you first start singing? Where did you realize, hey, this is something I want to do?
Well, I would have to go back to junior high school. I was always, through the years, singing in choirs. I have a musical family. My mother played guitar, my father played guitar and violin. So I was always in the choir, among other things. But my teachers, for some reason, always put me in the choir as a soprano, and I couldn't hit the notes. So, I enjoyed being in the choir. I enjoyed all the aspects of music that I was involved in. But one year, in, I believe it was the 8th grade, maybe, or the 9th grade, there was a special ensemble at the school that did like pop songs and theater songs.
Right.
That was separate from the choir. And I asked the teacher, I said, well, can I audition? And he said, well, no, I'm sorry. He said, all the soprano positions are already filled. And I said, well, can I audition as an alto? And he said, sure. So I did. I got in. And then I realized that I had a voice that I could really sing. I was singing all the solos. I was singing the Karen Carpenter songs. It was just life-altering. And that was really the beginning, and I never turned back.
And you found this on your own. Nobody pointed this out to you. You figured it out on your own.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah.
That's,
but, as I said, coming from a musical family too, always pointing me in the direction of music, but not knowing that it would be as a vocalist.
So when you say a musical family, they were all musicians, or were they just musically inclined, or what do you mean?
No, they were musicians, but not professional musicians.
But they all played something. They understood music. I assume that you started to read music early on then, yeah?
Yeah, I did. I had the prerequisite piano lessons as a young child. I studied violin for a brief year in grade school, and clarinet. I took up clarinet because I saw the clarinet on the Lawrence Welk show, which we'd watch all the time in my household. And I thought, that looks easier than the violin because you've got to hold the violin up and it's such a difficult instrument. So I switched over to clarinet. And actually, my mother said, well, you've taken piano, you've taken violin, and now you want to play the clarinet. You're going to have to pay for your own clarinet. And I'm like, oh no, what do I do? And she said, well, let's sell all your Barbie stuff. So we sold my Barbies, the fashion show, all the Barbie stuff. And I think I got like $75. And here's the sad ending to this story. I got the clarinet. I played it all through junior high and high school. And I sold the clarinet later. And I wish I had never sold it. It was a beautiful wooden buffet. So anyway, Barbies are gone and the clarinet is gone.
Wow. And the Barbies might have been worth something today too. Well, I want to go back a half a step. And for the listeners who might be under the age of 40, Lawrence Welk was an orchestra band leader, I guess you could say, who had a very popular television show back in the day. This is quite some time ago, and played a lot of polka music. I mean, that was
That's right. A one and a two and a...
Exactly. And he had always had bubbles in the air, apparently thinking it looked like champagne, I guess. All right. So do you consider yourself principally as a jazz singer, or do you think of yourself as a more broadly based singer, or is it mostly jazz for you?
I would say more broadly based. I think that when you come up in the business, you sort of have to identify yourself with one form of music,
sure,
which was jazz for me and still is jazz. Mm-hmm. And our record label, we've produced mostly all jazz artists.
Right, mostly jazz artists, including Josie Falbo, who's a great StoryBeat guest.
Yes, and Josie also sang a lot of jingles and does gospel and pop and everything.
Right.
So I've always liked to think of myself as a singer, as a vocalist. I like exploring all different kinds of music. Jazz is something that is really near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. I love singing jazz. It's expressive. The improvisation that's involved is just gives you such freedom, and it teaches you a lot about singing other genres too.
Well, of course, I assume you find other genres to sing challenges sometimes, and it's probably fun to have those challenges.
It is, and I really think, and I'm sure Josie Falbo would agree with me on this, singing the commercials, doing the jingle singing for the radio and TV commercials all the years, through the years, was such an education in so many ways, because you would go into the studio and it was at such a high level of musicianship, from the producers to the musicians to the studios. And you would walk out doing a 30-second spot or a 60-second spot, whether you were a solo singer or singing with a group. You'd leave the studio knowing that you really achieved perfection, as close as you could get to perfection.
Because that's what they demanded, yes?
That's what they demanded. That's what was required. You wanted everything to be in tune, of course, and to be, to be pro level. And I learned so much from that, which really has informed my singing. And I think later, after the jingle experience, when I started recording my own music and CDs, whether it was standards, jazz standards, or pop songs, songs from the Great American Songbook, which then later developed into my own music, I really think that experience in the recording studio doing all those jingles really helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. So when I listen to you sing, when I've listened to your songs, I can tell that you love what you're doing. It comes through. It comes shining out of the speaker. How much does passion enter into what it is you're doing? How important is passion for a singer to have for the song and for what they're doing?
Well, that's really everything, isn't it?
I would think.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when you think about the Broadway stage, for example, you're acting, you're as an actor, you're interpreting a song, you're interpreting a musical selection, yet you have to find it within yourself to create the sound and what you're trying to say, the story that you're trying to tell.
The emotion involved in it has to be there.
Yeah, that's
whatever
true.
that emotion is, whether it's a happy emotion or a sad emotion or a contemplative, it has to be there. Don't you think?
Yes, I do. I think that's so important, because you really got to bring it when you're in a live performance, like at some of the clubs you mentioned earlier in my bio. You really have to be ready to. I like to say, bring it. You have to really put everything into it and find your true, authentic self. And I think that's where the passion maybe comes through, because if you can really connect with your authentic self, then it will be true to the audience.
So in writing, we talk about finding your voice. Well, as a vocalist, you're also finding your voice within the fact that you're using your voice. Your voice as an artist has to come through as well. Who you are has to come through.
Yeah, it's kind of a lifelong process to find your voice.
Isn't that interesting?
Part of it is maybe in the beginning you're sort of copying or mimicking or using your influences from singers that you admire to say, oh, I'm going to sing this song like this, or I'm going to do a cover song and sing it like such and such.
Right.
But throughout your life, you have to find your authentic self and find your true voice. And, that's a difficult thing to try to teach someone or to explain to someone how you do that.
I'm not sure you can actually teach someone to have an authentic voice, but all you can do is push them toward them finding their own self, their own discovery. And you can coach somebody that way, but you can't literally teach someone, here's your voice.
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with the tone of your voice, projecting a sound from within that you can be expressive, but at the same time control. Because as a singer, well, I want to be in control, certainly, as having as much experience as I've had in the recording studio. It's really given me such an opportunity to perfect things and to go back and listen and say, oh, I should have opened up more to pronounce that word or that vowel in a different way that will open up my voice. And that gets into more technical things, but all of that is important to me as a singer, which then, with experience, I can hopefully transfer that to a live performance.
Well, you over time, you learn where those things are. I assume when you're very first starting out, it's very hard to know where those things are.
Sure it is. Yeah.
And did you go through formal training at some point earlier on?
I did. I go back to those experiences in choir, and I had wonderful teachers in school before I went to college. I did attend the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music as a voice major. And then I switched over to theater, and well, that's a long story. But anyway, yeah, I had formal voice training, and that was helpful in terms of learning how to sing through your range without, hitting that note where there you hit your break, and all of a sudden your tone changes from a full tone to a lighter tone. So all those things were just invaluable to me to have an education in music. However, I must say that when I met my husband, when I met Sparrow, he is self-taught. His music comes from within. He's such an inspiration to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that I learned as much from him about music as I learned from my education in school, because it's a whole different thing when you're approaching your music as more freely. And that was the first time I sang original music, was when I sang with Sparrow. He writes all his own music. So I thought, oh, he's a nice guy. Didn't know we were going to fall in love and get married at the time, but I thought, this is great. This is the first time I ever sang original music. And that really clicked with me. That really, really expanded my whole view of music.
Well, there's no question that schooling is important for many different things. For some people, it's not important at all.
True.
But if you've had schooling, you're still doesn't make you a full artist. It still doesn't make you a professional, and
Right.
you have to go grow into those things. But schooling can be a good foundation. That's the way I look at it, is it's a foundational thing, not the ultimate end goal.
True. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And as I said, just having this experience of kind of letting all that go and just singing this original music and jazz and improvising and not worrying about, am I singing this chord and these changes on these chords? I could be free.
I once had a professor in college who, I'll say no names, but at the end of the course, it was one of my favorite courses of all time. At the end of the course, he said, now forget everything I've taught you and just go be. And that's sort of what you're talking about. Now you got to be free as you, but you have this foundation of understanding, which is helpful.
Yeah, the foundation is good. And, you can't really, as you said, you can't really teach that. That just has to come from
It has
a
to
life experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a moment early on where you thought to yourself, you know what, I am pretty good at this, and I think I want to make something of this? Was there one of those pivotal moments?
Definitely. From the beginning, like I said, when I learned I was an alto and I could really sing,
That was the key moment for you.
it was the key moment, Steve. And it really changed my life, because when you realize that you have a talent, and I recognized that about myself, it just made me so happy that I had something that I could build my whole life on that. And I knew that was my profession. That's what I wanted to do. At that moment, I didn't know where it was going to lead, where it was going to take me, but I knew that was it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no way for you to really know, but you can then set goals, and you can move down a road toward making something of it, which is a really great thing. When did you start writing songs? Early on too, or did it take a while before you started to write?
It did take a while. I would always dabble at it a little bit, and probably my early songs they're in a file folder somewhere. They weren't great. They weren't, just okay.
Well, you have to start somewhere,
But you have to start somewhere. And then as I said, meeting Sparrow and recording original music with him, and then working with him on his music to suggest chords or lyrics and songs we would work on together. That was one moment that really informed me about writing. Then I would include some of his songs on my early records that were original. And then I met a wonderful soul by the name of King Fleming. He's dearly departed, great pianist, arranger, composer. And he wrote a lot of songs and recorded with Lorez Alexandria back in the day, among other wonderful singers. Wrote songs and lyrics for her. And we recorded a record on our label on SOUTHPORT Records with King. the King Fleming Songbook, all of his
Right.
original songs. And a few years later, he said, Joanie, I want to do a record with you. And I was like, well, okay. I didn't know what he meant. He said, well, I want to do a record with you, and I want you to put lyrics to all my songs.
Wow.
And I thought, well, how does he know that I can even do that? Because I didn't even know that I could do that. So
This is before you had ever written a word to any songs?
No. I had been writing. I'd have to go back and check what year was what. But excuse me for a moment. But what a boost, what a positive thing to have someone invite you to write lyrics. This legendary jazz legend in Chicago. That really gave me a boost, and I loved it, and it was successful. And I might have already recorded one of my records. I don't remember, Steve. But then I did my first record of all original music is called It's Not Easy. All original songs. And then I did a second record called As You Spend Your Life. And now my new record, My Original Plan, is my third record of all original music. And I'm just so happy.
How exciting and fulfilling is that? It's really a big deal.
I guess it is a big deal.
Well, it is. I mean, it's if you've written your own material and there it is for the world to listen to see, that's very fulfilling, I would hope,
Yeah, and it's not. This was something that was a change, I think, for an audience that was used to me singing mostly jazz standards and singing jazz in the clubs.
Right.
My original records, my records of original music, are not really what you would typically call jazz as a genre. So my tastes have always been very wide open. I grew up listening to the radio, in the 60s and 70s, and listening to Motown and the Beatles and Burt Bacharach and Jimmy Webb and, Elton John and you name it. A lot of my influences must have come from there.
Of course.
As much as, if not more than, from jazz.
Interesting. What for you, this is a question I ask pretty much as many artists as I can, and I think it's my favorite question. What for you makes a good song good? What makes it great or good?
Well, I think it has to have a melody and something that you can remember. Something that after hearing the song, the listener wants to recall it and go back and listen to it again and sing along, perhaps. That makes a great song for sure. Something memorable, something that speaks to you. Maybe it's a lyric, but I think it's the story, which would imply the lyric, but the story of the song, the emotional impact that it has on you, something that you remember.
It's something that's a little bit visceral, hits you in your gut.
Yeah.
I think that's really true for so much art, because there's an awful lot of art that we don't understand why we like it, but we like it anyway. And so I asked that question because I think it's great to hear various artists answer that question as to what makes something work for him or her. And so which pop or jazz singers do you currently admire? Who are you listening to right now?
Well, right now, it's funny. I tend to go back and I don't listen to a whole lot of current music. I love Brazilian music. So I'm always going back and listening to Jobim and those singers and musicians. Bebel Gilberto is one of my favorites. I love her music. I love her songwriting. She has a beautiful voice. She always sings in tune. which is which is great.
I mean, how do you go wrong with Gilberto Orjobin?
No, you don't. You just don't. I've always loved Sade.
Mhm.
She's got a sound. I tend to gravitate towards vocalists that have a unique sound, which is funny because one of my favorite singers of all time is Sammy Davis Jr. And I remember hearing a story about how Sammy would always imitate other singers when he first started singing.
Right.
He would imitate Frankie Lane, or I'm talking the old, old days. And
that's even before Lawrence Welk.
That's before Lawrence Welk. But one of his, promoters suggested to him, you should find your own voice. And when he did, that's when he became the great Sammy Davis Jr. And that goes back to what we were talking about, finding your own true self and your own true voice. I know I avoided the question about what I'm listening to now, but I listen to a lot of film score music.
Interesting.
Sparrow and I love Morricone, his recent film, The Hateful Eight, the Quentin Tarantino movie.
Right.
That's a pretty powerful score. I just go back.
So you're listening to more music than music with lyrics. You're listening to less songs and more music with no words to it.
That could be sometimes, yeah. The film score stuff is, yeah.
I listen to lots of film scores, so I understand it. There's something, because film scores film scores in general tend to lend emotion to a picture and a tone to a picture. So the music itself tends to be emotional in its core. It's not just a rhythm. It's something else. There's something that's emotional about it. And
so
that's because it's actually adding or plussing a picture that would otherwise maybe not be as interesting without the score. So
right, and you remember the story about Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann with Psycho.
Yes.
Hitchcock did not want any music in the shower scene. He said no music. He wanted it to be silent because he thought the music would not inform the scene, but would take away from it. But when he heard the music, it was undeniable.
Well, and that's clearly one of the most famous, well-known, and powerful pieces of movie music ever created, period.
With no lyrics.
Absolutely no lyrics whatsoever. All right, let's talk about performance for a little bit, because you've done your fair share of live performance as well. Aside from actually being in performance, what do you do to develop your voice for performance?
Well, that comes from my training in school, I would say, vocalizing. I vocalized this morning. I warmed up to be able to speak with you. To prepare for performance, it's the typical stuff. Drink a lot of water, be healthy, and vocalize, warm up your voice. I know that, someone asked Barbra Streisand recently in some magazine I read, I think it was in the New York Times magazine section. Do you sing in the shower? Do you sing around the house? She said, no, she doesn't do any of that. She never sings around the house, but I really wonder, does she warm up? She must.
Well, she must. But at the same time, she's just one of those, I don't want to use this term loosely at all. She's a freak of nature. She's a unique sound and voice, and has been since she was a young person. And it just comes out of her. And that's unusual. Most people have to really work at it. They don't get a free pass. I have a feeling she's got a lot of free passes in there.
Yeah.
So is there a regular routine that you go through? Do you have a series of exercises that you regularly do?
Well, you'll have to pay for that.
Well, can you give us a clue? Don't give us the actual lesson.
No, humming. Humming is good, and I do a lot of
so it's not a specific set routine that you go
no
through.
It's not. And
That's what I was
really,
curious.
Steve, honestly, I don't practice. I really don't. I practice when I have a performance or a show or something that or a recording. I prepare. I would say it's more preparation than practicing for me. I don't practice every day. That's just me.
Well, if that's what works for you, that's what works for you. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about you're going to go do a show somewhere, do you select songs with the audience in mind, or are you selecting songs that please you mostly?
That's an interesting question. I would say, it does depend. I mean, I've done some theater shows in Chicago. Like, for example, I think several years ago, we did a show at the Bailiwick that my friend and producer Ralph Lampkin was involved with. And it was very specifically a Harold Arlen show.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, we had to choose the material for that show.
Yeah, of course.
If I'm doing a show at
well, Harold Arlen wrote, maybe most people think of the greatest song that's ever been written, which is Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Oh, yeah.
That little thing.
That little ditty. I didn't do that one. And that's a hard song.
That is a hard song, and it's been recorded who knows how many hundreds of times,
Yeah. But, for gigs, for clubs, I usually choose what I want to do.
It must please you, so then you're hoping the audience goes along on the ride with you.
Yeah, and I don't just go in and wing it. I mean, if I'm doing a show, say at a jazz club, I will have more or less of a set list.
Right.
I'm not just going to call tunes off the top of my head. That's crazy. Well, it's crazy for me. I would want to be prepared.
Well, of course.
With a song list and keys, of course, your key and your charts and everything. So yeah, but I would say I primarily would choose material that I want to sing, which would make it so that the audience would hopefully reciprocate and see where I'm coming from.
And hopefully enjoy. I mean, that's the key, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It has to be enjoyable, I would think, has to be enjoyable for you first. And then the audience hopefully enjoys along with you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you go to, I can't even think of an example, but if you go to a show and the artist isn't putting their heart into it and is just going by rote and running through.
They're walking through it. Yeah, nobody's going to enjoy it if they're walking through it, for sure.
Yeah.
So when you decide, I'm going to sing a song I've never sung before in concert, and you're going to do it, it's something new for you, or it may be something new you've written, one or the other. Is there anything that you go through psychologically, aside from physically, to develop that song so that you can sing it in an inspired way? How do you find your way into the way you're going to sing a song? Is there a routine you go through?
Well, if it's a song that I have not written, if it's someone else's song, I would want to learn the origins of the song first. That's how I approach it. If it's a standard, something from the songbook, or a pop song that you've heard on the radio, even a Beatles song, I'd want to go back and learn the chords, learn the melody, learn the lyrics, and then I would think about, how can I change this to make it my own? So normally what I would do is sit down at the piano with the music and do a new arrangement of the song, come up with some alternate chords, with having the freedom of improvising through jazz in my background. I might change the melody in certain spots, try to make it fresh.
And so you're coming at it from an artistic perspective. You're trying to find something that becomes you painting that song in sound.
Yeah, I don't want to, I would not want to do a cover song or a copy tune and just say, oh, sing this pop song, sing this standard, and just do it the way Doris Day did it. Or, I'd want to do it the way Joanie does it.
Right, sure. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of doing that? Is there something that you regularly go through and boy, I've got to work my way through X, Y, or Z? Or does it just come naturally to you?
Well, as I said, I do spend time looking at the song and learning the song from its inception, from its how it was intended, from the original composer, and mostly just rearranging it, sitting at the piano. If it's my own music, I guess that's easier to prepare because I already did all that work when I wrote the song.
Sure, sure. And so when you are performing live, what are the things that you are most concerned about going into a live performance? It's not memorizing the words or whether your voice is going to hold up or anything like that. What are the things that you're most concerned about when you go into a live performance?
Yeah, live performing is certainly, it can be challenging. It's a different animal. It's exciting. You don't want to be nervous, but you want to have your nerve. There's a difference there, a distinction. But I would say the technical aspects of making sure that the sound is right. That's the hardest part, not knowing, are you going to have monitors that you're going to be able to hear your voice back over the band to the point where you can clearly project your voice without pushing? Because the minute you start pushing your voice when you're singing or straining, then, forget it. I mean, it's just not going to be clear and effective. It's not going to be beautiful. You're not going to be producing a beautiful tone.
Right. And I was going to say, particularly in jazz, really, you don't want to be pushing it really much at all, I would think.
Doesn't matter the style.
It doesn't.
No, I don't think so.
I just think of jazz as being more pulled back or laid back than, say, rock and roll, where some rock is very loud and very pushed, but jazz has a tendency to be a little bit more, behind the beat and laid back a little bit.
That may or may not be true, but I know one thing. As a singer, I am a very, how would you say, when I'm on stage, I like to be theatrical almost, even with jazz. I like to express and, with my body, with my hands, with my face, my expression. And sometimes I find that the band behind me, if it's someone that I haven't worked with on a show or musicians that I can say, this is what I want, you're just going into a club, that excitement that I'm projecting sometimes makes them play harder and louder, which gives me pause. It's like, wait a minute, just because I'm the leader, I'm the front singer, I'm doing this, you guys got to keep it down. That's happened before. It's funny. It's funny.
No doubt. They want to, well, it's like anything else in life. Sometimes people want to be the front person when they're not the front person.
I don't think they want to be the front person. I just think they get excited.
So their excitement then makes them play harder or louder or whatever it is.
Right. So see, that happens in jazz too. So it's not this laid back thing necessarily. So you got to be careful.
What would you say are the most common mistakes that young singers make in those cases? What mistakes did you make as a young singer that you now don't do?
Well, you have to be generous, I think, in terms of understanding that you're all in this together. You're not the star until you are the star. I'm not saying I'm the star, but I'm just, as an example, you have to have open ears and an understanding that, oh, now it's your turn to do what you do. So just be generous, I would say, as a performer.
Be generous. I think that's pretty good
Yeah.
for any collaborative artist.
Yeah.
Is generosity is very helpful. It's true for actors. It's true for directors. It's true for writers. It's just be generous. I think that's a very good way to say it. Let's talk for a moment about producing, which you've done a certain amount of, including your current CD, My Original Plan. You co-produced this with Fareed Haque, yes?
Yes.
And so let's talk about that. And you've produced other things, and you've been around the music business quite some time. When you're starting to think about, as a producer now, you have to put on a different thinking cap as opposed to you're the singer. I assume that they're going to overlap, but when you're doing both, you sometimes, I assume, as the producer, have to hold the artist back a little bit for one reason or another. And the artist is going to want to push the producer to go down, you might want to spend more money or more time or whatever it might be. How do you regulate that? How do you work that for yourself?
Well, on this particular CD, on My Original Plan, it started out with a couple of really intensive rehearsals that I had just between Fareed and I, just the two of us. I was sitting at the piano, going over the songs. He had his guitar. We went through every song, talked about the style, the arrangement, how we wanted to have the band play these songs. And that's where Fareed is so helpful in working and collaborating with him, because he'll always come up with an idea that I hadn't thought of. So for me, usually I'm producing all my own records. On this one with Fareed, it gave me the opportunity to sort of pull back a little bit and say, oh, maybe this is a better idea than what I had. So the collaborative nature of it was brought such a good perspective to the whole process. And not only from how we were going to record the songs and the arrangements, but when we got to the mixing, when everything was all done, and then we would mix the record, Fareed would say, well, wait a minute now. We want this to sound more produced. I remember him saying, oh, this sounds great. We had My Original Plan, the title track, and I thought it sounded great just with the guitar, bass, drums, and me from the original session that we recorded. Right. And he said, well, it does sound great, but it kind of sounds like a demo. We need to add a few layers of sound to it. So then we would add some background keyboard parts. And
how do you make that decision? How do you decide which instrument to add? How do you decide what the tone is going to be? What do you go through? Is it a conversation? Is it, again, a gut decision? How do you get there?
Yeah, it was conversations with Fareed, basically. We decided on certain things. We changed our minds through the process. And on the title track, we ended up deciding that vibes was going to be the key element on that song. Vibes, yeah. And of course, it wasn't a human vibe player. We ended up both playing different vibes parts on the keyboard. Right. And he would see, this was all during the pandemic too, this last year. So he would send me WAV files through the internet, and I would listen, and then I would add them to the computer, to the track.
I see.
And yeah, and for certain things, I was really lucky because we recorded all the basic tracks in December of 2019 with the band. So I was really lucky that happened. So throughout 2020, we added these parts either through WAV files or whatever. And then towards the end of the year, we could mix some things together.
Synthesizers have changed everything, haven't they?
They have. But then on the other hand, there's a song called John's Place that I recorded. It's a more of a jazz song. And the original band was with John Devlin on 6-string electric bass. He's playing on the whole record. He's been my friend for over 40 years. He's got such a, well, he's got ears. He's got ears. He can play in any style. And what he played was beautiful. But Fareed suggested that that song, being more of a jazz swing song, really would sound nice with an acoustic bass. And I thought about it and I said, but John sounds great. He said, I know John sounds great, but it would sound better with an acoustic bass. So that's what we did. We added Kurt Schweitz, who's a longtime collaborator of ours, on acoustic, and it really did make a difference in the song.
So what do you write on? Do you write on guitar or piano? How do you write?
Piano.
On piano.
I write on piano.
And that's because, as I've asked other composers and producers, the piano gives you the full orchestra really within the keys, yes?
Well, for me, the piano is my instrument. I'm not a pianist,
right?
But I got straight A's in functional piano in college. So I can play, and I can play well enough to compose and to write and to come up with my songs and my ideas. But then again, Fareed can take those chords and sometimes say, ooh, here's a nice juicy chord that's just going to sound great on this vamp, and it's different and it's not something that I would have played. So again, part of this producing was being open to this perspective of this collaboration, which really informed a lot on this record for me.
So once you have, okay, so you've written a song and you say, okay, we're going to produce this song. What is the very first thing that you do with it? Do you then sit down with a Fareed, or do you on your own think, I want this song to sound like X, Y, or Z? Where does your thinking begin with it?
I guess, I guess it depends on the song. There's 14 songs on here. They're all quite different, actually. They represent different styles and genres. So as I say, it depends on the song. Having had the good fortune of recording all these songs with the trio, within 3 days, by the way, it was a long weekend, a 3-day weekend. Fareed was going to be in town for another gig. John Devlin and Louise Everling, my drummer, the four of us recorded all of these songs as a group.
Did you arrange them?
I did. I arranged them, and then Fareed added some things to the arrangement.
Right.
So they were my charts. I wrote out all the charts. Those intensive rehearsals we had gave Fareed the opportunity to look at the songs and say, let's add this section, or let's start off with the hook here in the beginning of the song instead of putting it in the middle of the song. So he sort of put pieces of the puzzle together maybe in a different way than I would have. But all of that was decided before the sessions, although on the sessions, we did change some things, you know.
Well, sure. You would go
You're in the middle of it. You come up with an idea.
Of course, I would think that once you're in the session and you're starting to play, things are going to get altered somewhat because you realize this works or doesn't work, or here's something better.
Exactly. And that's part of the production too, Steve.
Sure.
You know, that's part of producing too, is being able to recognize, oh, this works, this doesn't. Let's change this.
Have you gone into a circumstance where you thought everything was going to be great? You got into the recording session and you realized, well, this arrangement doesn't work at all. And how did you fix it? Or has that never happened to you?
I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that. I'm sure it has. But you know, you just deal with it.
So you've never had a major disaster where you went in, you had a certain time constraint and you had to have things done by X, Y, or Z time. And now what do we do? You've never had one of those.
No, I've only had minor catastrophes.
Minor catastrophes. You're among the lucky.
I wrote a song a long time ago called Minor Catastrophe. I need to bring that one back out again.
If you think about them right, they're all minor catastrophes, but sometimes the minor catastrophes are bigger than others. It just depends on what's going on. Do you enjoy the arranging and producing process? Is that something you enjoy?
I love it. I love it. It's the best part. it's the best part of doing this, outside of realizing these compositions, having them grow and be born into a song. And then the process is, enjoying the process is certainly part of it. And all of the vocals you were asking me about producing, all the vocals on this record, I have to thank Sparrow, my husband. He produced my vocals. I could not sing in the studio on my own music and have anybody else produce my vocals except Sparrow.
Got it.
He knows me so well. He's patient. He knows what I need, and he can make a suggestion to me as a vocalist, and I won't take it the wrong way. So I really, really I'm really grateful that I have him for that.
Part of the work of a great producer is being able to communicate an idea to an artist so that they then come and do what the producer thinks is the way it should be done. And not everybody is good at that,
Right.
That's a whole trick in itself. A lot of it's psychology.
You're right.
It's not art, it's psychology.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up, because the psychological aspect of producing, and all the years in the studio that I would produce other artists, I'm glad you said that, because that is like 90% making someone feel comfortable enough in the studio to get the best performance out of them is just.
Well, ultimately, it's like so many things in the performance arts, it's a collaboration. And unless you have the wherewithal to go into a studio by yourself, play every instrument yourself, engineer it yourself, then you're always going to be dealing with other people. And that requires communication. And
as a producer, you have to gain their trust.
No question.
Right.
Well, for sure. If you don't have it, then artists are notoriously skittish. So they might suddenly be giving you a really bad performance because there is no trust. So I think that trust has to be there. What do you do to refresh your well when you're tired, you're burnt out, you've been through a lot, you're trying to find new inspiration? What do you do to find new inspiration? Where do you go? What do you do?
Steve, I really don't worry about it. I kind of just go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't feel inspired, I don't approach writing music or anything that I do as something I have to do every day.
Right.
The only thing I have to do every day, besides eating and sleeping and all that, is exercise. And boy, because days I skip, if I don't do yoga or do a little exercise, I just don't feel good, But as far as
so your body is your temple, and you've got to keep it maintained. Yeah.
Well, sure. We're all human. We do the best we can. We're all going to party a little bit too much every now and then and eat the wrong thing or whatever. But yeah, stretching and yoga is great. It's really good. I like it a lot.
Interesting. Well, I've been speaking for not quite an hour with the great Joanie Pallatto.
It can't be already.
It is. We're coming toward the end of today's Story Beat, and so I'm just curious, in all of your lengthy experiences, can you relate for the listeners a story that is, quirky, offbeat, weird, or maybe just plain funny in all of your experiences?
Well, I've got many.
Well, tell us one or two.
One or two. I'll try to tell you a quick one first. Back in Cincinnati, there was a jazz club there called Emanon, and it was owned by the late, great Ed Moss, pianist. Ed Moss was like a god in Cincinnati. Everyone flocked to this tiny little club to hear him play the piano, and as did I. So one night I went in, and I would always go to listen, but I never sang. I never sat in. And this was in my jazz days. So a bass player that I had been working with invited me up on stage to sing. And it was bass, drums, and I think a sax player. And I'm thinking to myself, oh God, I had never sung with a band with no chordal instrument.
Okay.
So it was just bass, drums, and sax, no piano, no guitar. I thought, oh God, how am I going to do this? So I remember the song. I sang, the song is You. I hear music when I look at you. The song is You, right? So I don't know why I picked that song, but I guess I had been working on it at the time. So I said, okay, Joanie, you're going to get up there and you're going to sing, and then you're going to sing the second verse, and you're going to change the melody to the lyrics, and then you're going to scat. And whatever you do, don't stop. Don't stop. For some reason, I had that in my mind because, there was no chordal instrument. What am I going to do? Don't stop. So then the next thing I know, Ed Moss comes out from the back, and he comes in and he sits down at the piano. And I saw him sit at the piano. I thought, oh my God, he's going to play with me. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And I just kept singing. I wouldn't stop. I kept singing because I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. Next thing I know, he stood up and walked out the front door and left. So what did I learn from that? That was a teachable moment, Steve. That was certainly a teachable moment. I learned to pay attention. Pay attention, Joanie. What's going on the stage?
And it helps to be very prepared so that you can go with whatever that flow is. Yeah.
I wasn't prepared.
You weren't prepared at all.
But you know what? I didn't beat myself up over it. I can laugh at it now.
Well,
right?
That's good. Did you say you had a second story?
Yeah. What was I thinking of when you asked that? Well, when we were in New York at Pangea, we did. I think it was in 2016, and again, Ralph Lampkin brought us in to present a 1-hour concert version of a musical that Sparrow and I wrote called A Musical. Okay,
it's a musical called A Musical.
Yeah, A Musical. Yeah, I guess you could pronounce it A Musical. I don't know. Anyway, our friend, my good friend from Cincinnati, from the conservatory, Broadway star, Bill Nolte.
Oh,
we
wow.
invited, yeah, you know Bill?
Bill's been on the show.
That's right, he has. He's my good friend. We always invite him to be part of our shows when we're in New York or anywhere. So he was to be the narrator. And as I said, it was this condensed version of this musical. So Sparrow's brother and his wife were coming in from upstate New York, and he had never heard us perform together much or at all, if whatever. The house was full, okay? We're waiting and we're waiting. So Sparrow kind of gave up. He shrugged his shoulders. He said, well, let's just go ahead. Let's take our position at the stage. And okay, so Sparrow got behind the piano. I'm on stage. Bill Nolte's on stage. We're at our microphones, and we're waiting and we're waiting. And all of a sudden, in walks Barry and Janet. So our good friend from New York, another singer that I've worked with, Frances Asher Perrin, she was in the audience, and all of a sudden I heard her shout, oh, that must be Sparrow's brother. When he walked in, and it just, the house, everybody started laughing, and it really broke the ice, because we were a little nervous, to present this musical in 1 hour, and we're waiting for Sparrow's brother, and it just broke the ice. Everybody just cracked up, and we had a great time.
I love moments like that, because the tension sometimes is so thick, and then when it breaks, it's like, okay.
I know, it really, really helped. Yeah.
We're here for fun. We're not here for, a dour moment.
Right.
So last question for you today, Joanie.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip for those who are trying to break into today's industry, or maybe they're in a little bit and they're trying to get to that next level?
Well, Steve, we talked about being your authentic self.
Right.
That may sound obvious, and it might take a lifetime to really understand what it means, but you've always got to really strive to make a statement from your heart, from you, from within. So I think that's one of the most important things. And to be prepared, which we discussed. But other than that, I think these days, a lot of artists are doing their own promotion, and I can certainly speak to that. I mean, I've got a great team. I've got a team that I love, that loves me, but I'm still doing a lot of my own promotion like I do for Southport Records. So what I've learned is that when you're making a pitch to a prospective contact or a writer, you really need to research the company you're pitching and the person, to know what they do, to be personal, to say something about them. In other words, you're not the only one in this game, okay? You can think to yourself, oh, why don't they know me? Well, you have to ask yourself, why don't you know them? Why don't you know them? Okay. So I think that's important. And I think, it's kind of like you could say, oh, well, you're talking about just stroking somebody. No, it's not. You want people to know that you care about them, that you've invested time in learning who they are and what they do and how they can help you achieve your goals.
Oh, well, that's extremely wise advice. There's a big difference between kissing somebody's butt and
that's what I mean.
And actually being able to converse with them about what it is that they're about. And those are two different things. And there's sometimes a fine line, but most of the time it's just being well informed so that you can have an intelligent conversation with them about what they do as well, versus you're just telling them how wonderful they are. Those are
and when like I said, say you're sending a quick pitch, an email or a Facebook message or whatever. Well, don't just say, "Hey, I'm Joanie Pallatto. Listen to my new record."
No, you want to try and personalize it in some way,
or
to come at them. You really want to come at whoever it is in a way. This is what I've always learned is you want to come at them in a way that they can see how they can profit from it, or they can be how their life can be made better from it. And so when you do that, then suddenly they become invested in it versus it's how can I help you?
Right.
I think that's extremely wise advice, that you spend your time learning who the other person is that you're dealing with. So I can't thank you enough, Joanie. This has been just a terrific hour on StoryBeat, and so much wisdom from doing this thing called singing and producing and writing music for more than a year or two. And so I want to thank you kindly for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I'm glad, if I can say, that we're learning about each other.
Well, absolutely. Right? That's what's the beauty of doing this show. I get to learn about you. Sometimes you get to learn a little bit about me. So as promised, we have a real treat for you today. Please enjoy now 2 songs from Joanie's new CD, My Original Plan. Here now is Do Butterflies Cry, followed by the title track, My Original Plan.
So steal the sky from a perfect butterfly with wings that span in nature's diagram. She tries to blend between the sun and land, and then gently kisses my right hand. You're born to fly, my friendly butterfly, toward the light in graceful morning flight. So try to dance against the flowered plants as you rest your wings and begin to sing. At night, do you rest your wings? What is the butterfly plan? Your colors are so true, kaleidoscope of you. You flutter and tease me with romance. So still the sky from a perfect butterfly with wings that span in nature's diagram. She tries to blend between the sun and land, and then gently kisses my right hand. You simply want to fly, my pretty butterfly. You know the butterfly plan. Why walk when you can fly, my lovely butterfly? I'm waiting for you to make me cry. Mariposa, la 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 la. Do butterflies dance? Do butterflies dance? And do butterflies cry? My original plan was to learn to fly a kite. My original plan was to know what's wrong from right. And then when I discovered more, I walked toward an open door and was invited to take my time and explore. My original plan was to find a lifelong friend. My original plan thought that love would never end. As my imagination soared, I couldn't possibly be bored. I'll continue with my goal to find more. My original plan, na 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 na. before it's too late. I wanna do everything. I wanna go everywhere. I've never been. Before it's too late. I'm gonna turn winter into spring. And where do I begin before it's too late? My original plan was before it's too late. I wanna do everything. I wanna go everywhere. I've never been. Before it's too late. I'm gonna turn winter into spring. And where do I begin before it's too late? With my original plan was to be a movie star. My original plan was to travel wide and far. And then I finally found my home. There was no longer need to roam. No regretting about the things I could have done. With my original plan. Oh yeah. I wanna see the sun go down, down, down. I hear you. Things change. I was gonna go everywhere. I wanna go far, far away. Go back and ride that El Camino. Ride.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.